Hey everyone, James here. I just wanted to hop on and provide you all a warning before the episode. This episode is rather personal and vulnerable, and I ask that you treat our co hosts with the respect that is due with that kind of information. The information provided includes history of drug use and the history of dealing with thoughts of suicide. Please keep everyone who is dealing with the same sort of situation, especially when it comes to thoughts of suicide, in your prayers. Thank you. I was trying to figure out a way to make that muted so I could just kind of, start recording without everyone else knowing, because that's always kind of fun, listening to a conversation. I've always liked that at the start of podcasts, but
just kind of fly in the wall. Like all of a sudden, you just show up, and there's already a couple folks, and they're already talking about, oh yeah, I got a toddler that's just not going to bed and running late and all the good stuff. So yeah.
I mean, that's always kind of the fun point. There's actually a really one of my favorite podcasts is classical stuff you should know, and they actually have like an actual setup. So when he hits record, the mics turn on. Some of the guys don't always know it, and so they're just kind of chatting away. And there are a couple of times where it's like, "Oh man, it would be so funny if you were recording this right now." And he's like, yes, I am. And they all start bursting into laughter. It's really, really great. So,
By the way, I am recording this right now.
Yeah.
And I can see though, like how if you had someone like a politician, or if you had, someone that's reputation is on the line off their public image, and they are saying some pretty uncouth things, or their guard is really down, and all of a sudden it's like, oh no, we can't do that. That's going to ruin my public persona, guys. Like,
yep. Yeah. Which, I mean, if you actually ever had something like of that nature where you had somebody on, I think it's ethically, especially like an interview like that, it's kind of ethically required that you at least kind of go, hey, here's what we were going to post. Do you need us to edit anything, or yada, 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 to an extent,
Yeah. I don't know. I think like the podcasts that I like to listen to are more they're more like stream of consciousness. So that they don't really have like an outline or a script. A really fun one I've been listening to lately is called Blurry Creatures. And it's taken a really interesting turn. So it's started off as a Bigfoot podcast, like talking and interviewing people about like encounters with Bigfoot or other type of like cryptid supernatural type creatures or entities. And so then as you get into it, I think they're like almost 300 episodes in now, but as you get into it, all of a sudden it's like, no, actually we're going to explore where we think these creatures possibly come from. They start talking about like biblical stuff, and becomes very clear that there's some Christian dudes, and like they're talking about, well, people say like these cryptid creatures, like it's just not biblical, they don't exist. But I would say to those people, you really haven't read your Bible if you don't think that like giants or unclean spirits or these other things didn't exist at one time. And what's not to say that like Bigfoot isn't a one of those like entities, or one of those things that's kind of like stuck around from after the flood. And so it's gotten, and then sometimes it gets like way out there, like with like extraterrestrials and UFOs and stuff. But man, it's really fun to listen to, and they have some cool guests on there.
Yeah. I mean, if that's kind of your thing, I think you would really like Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World. Have you heard of this?
Oh yeah, I've listened to a few episodes of Jimmy Akin, and I love that he gets way out there too. And I would like to put those two people, like those, I think that would be like a great combination of like, let's put Jimmy Akin and Blurry Creatures in touch, and it would be a really cool thing. Just because Jimmy, he's so open, like, yeah, like excellent, like he's this great Catholic apologist, and is a real defender of the Catholic faith. But then also he's like, but there's things that we don't definitively know,
Mm-hmm.
and it's okay for us to question these things, or it's okay to think about these things, and it's okay to look into these things. But just remember, like, even if extraterrestrials exist and they're real, doesn't change the fact that Jesus of Nazareth is the Christ, who is the Messiah, who came to save humanity from their sins. That doesn't change the fact if there are extraterrestrials. And in fact, like, if they do exist, uh, we probably have a duty to tell them about Jesus, and tell them, like, hey, like, 2,000 years ago, there was this really faithful Jew that claimed he was the son of God. That through divine revelation, we've known that he is the Son of God. Here's his readings, and here's his writings, and here's his teachings. And
Mm-hmm.
I hope that your culture and your race would adopt him as your Messiah too. That'd be an interesting conversation between the emissaries of Earth and the emissaries of the extraterrestrial.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Or what was it? I think Thomas Aquinas also he 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 uh he states, it's, what was it? Because God became incarnate into human likeness doesn't mean that he's restricted only by the human likeness. If there's other things out there that have also been fallen due to their own past and have original sin on their souls as well, and being created in the image and likeness of God, that doesn't, just because he did it once doesn't mean he can't do it again in a different way. So yeah, it's very fascinating. So you want to jump into things here, and we'll just hit the questions. And
Yeah, sure.
perfect. So, well, so for everyone who stuck around through that a bit of banter there, welcome to Those Catholic Gamers, a podcast about Catholic guys coming together to talk about video games and their Catholic faith. I am James, your host, and today I am joined by Andrew.
How's it going,
Not
James?
Joe.
Thanks for having me. Yeah.
So, as well, first off, this is what, going to be your second time on the podcast.
Yeah, I think it is. The first time on the podcast, I had a blast. We really just kind of made a pitch for, like, hey, what's a video game that maybe one of us have played, but another one hasn't played? It gave me the opportunity to nerd out about the Prince of Persia a little bit. So for any of the listeners or subscribers that haven't gone back and listened to that episode, I think I made a really good case for the Prince of Persia trilogy for the Nintendo GameCube, Xbox 360, PlayStation 2, that era of video games.
Yeah, and it looks like they're on Steam now, so you can always just go back and get those there, I think. So, yeah, you definitely play those. And yeah, what was that? That was episode 17. This is going to be episode 21. And so the whole purpose of this episode is kind of a bit of a spin-off that I've been kind of wanting to do. And that's where I just sit down with each of the co-hosts that we've had on so far and just kind of discuss your video gaming hobby. One, would you consider it a hobby? And then how has your interaction with that hobby changed throughout your life? And of course, we're always trying to keep things balanced, not always if we have failed in a point in our lives where video games became more important than God. That's always something nice to bring up, because we're all fallen, we all sin, and so how did we, or are we working our way out of that? How did we work our way out of that? How are we keeping things prioritized, but still also enjoying this hobby that we all mutually kind of connect with? But as some people would probably guess, and others probably won't, I really don't know you that well, Andrew.
Yeah, I think we met at Connor's wedding.
Yes. So
And then maybe a couple times in Bismarck at a couple gatherings at Connor's house. And then otherwise, on the Tuesday night games with the boys, jumping on, and it was Joe, Connor, and I, going through Payday or going through we played a lot of Payday 3 when it came out. Did a couple of other games, like some indie games that I'd never even thought to play or heard of, like there's like a bomb defusal one. I can't remember the bomb defusal one, what it's called, but one person is defusing the bomb, the other person is remotely looking at the bomb defusal manual, and you have to describe and talk your way through it to defuse the bomb. And there's a couple different game modes. Don't remember what that one's called. We did play some auto chess kind of games like Dota Underlords a couple times. And then you joined in on some Age of Empires 2 games, and I'm terrible at RTS games. So it's just there's a lot going on. That's like one of the things that is different between us, right? And it really harkens back to the games that we grew up playing, right?
Mhm.
So where Connor like grew up playing Age of Empires, and he's got all of his macros set, and it's just second nature for him to be switching between managing his economy at the base versus scouting out versus building an army that's countering the opponent's army, and all of that stuff. It's all second nature for someone who grew up playing that style of game versus someone like me who was very much like a couch co-op or a single player console gaming growing up. That moved more like I didn't get a PC until I was in college. So of my video game hobby, where it really started was in the childhood, and I can remember maybe being 6 or 7 years old, and I had an uncle that was in the Air Force, and he flew flight simulators, and so he had a computer at his house with a flight simulator on it, and I can remember watching him fly the flight simulator, or him popping me up on his lap and let me take the joystick and kind of fly a plane around a little bit, and then going and moving on from that, and he's like, oh, by the way, like here's this really cool game called Doom, and a first person demon hunter running through a map, and it's so I can remember being exposed to that as a kid, the kind of that first iteration of first person shooters. Growing up a little bit more, my grandmother had a Game Boy at her house, and so if it was like starting to be quiet time, or it was maybe only a couple kids at the house at any given time, we were allowed to play the Game Boy. So it was either like Donkey Kong Country or Tetris on the Game Boy. To then, I can't remember exactly what year it was, but one year for Christmas, I must have been 6, 7, 8, 9 years old, somewhere in there. For Christmas one year, I got a Nintendo 64. So, our family followed the Saint Nicholas tradition. So, you wrote your list of things that you wanted for Santa. You sent the letter off, and then you woke up on Christmas Day, and Saint Nicholas had brought a present for you. And that year it was the Nintendo 64. And the games that I had was Super Mario 64, Bomberman 64, and The Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time. And those were the 3 games that really started my hobby.
Perfect. And then, so to kind of provide a fuller picture here, you were raised Catholic, correct?
Yeah. So my grandmother was Catholic. My mom was Catholic. My dad wasn't, but was one of those wishes of my mom is that we're gonna raise our children Catholic, and he didn't have any objections to that. And so yeah, grew up going to church on Sundays, going to CCD on Wednesday nights, going through the sacraments. First grade receiving, or first grade going to your first reconciliation, and then shortly after your first Holy Communion, continuing the CCD process, starting to go to confirmation classes my sophomore year of high school. So my sophomore and junior year were 2 years of confirmation classes. Got confirmed at the end of my junior year as a full member of the Catholic faith, and was practicing the faith while I lived at home. But then I joined the military and went to basic training, went to AIT, and then when I got done with that, came back into college. And here you have a young man whose life up to that point was very regimented by their parents.
Mm-hmm.
was very regimented by drill instructors and military
Mm-hmm.
instructors to now you're on a college campus 180 miles away from home and there's no one to tell you what to do. And so I like like the prodigal son, I went off and I said, nope, I want my inheritance. I'm going to go out in the world and I'm going to live my own way. And really made a mess of it by the end there.
Sure. Sure. And so, um, I just want to push and kind of discover a little bit. So, when you went into the military, I'm assuming you basically like, were you one of those classic people where they got confirmed and they kind of flew away, and then military was just the nail in the coffin on that, or was being exposed to the military and different um, perspectives? Was that kind of what brought you away a little bit?
Well, part of it was, I think that, uh, you know, we were when growing up, yeah, we were raised Catholic, but I can remember there was periods of my childhood to where we were like Christmas and Easter Catholics. Um,
Oh, okay.
and so like it wasn't, but then like it was like during the school, like during summertime, we were out at the lake a lot and we weren't going to mass on Sunday. It was like, oh, it's the weekend, we're going to the lake. We wouldn't be going to church or going to mass during the weekends. But then like school season would run around and it's like, okay, so since it's school, you have CCD on Wednesday night, and then since you guys have to do homily reports for your CCD classes, then we'll go to mass on Sunday. Um, and I think that that was not I think that was because of my parents' relationship at the time
Mm-hmm.
and my mom being stronger in the Catholic faith than my dad, and
Mm-hmm.
the conflicts in the marriage that has when you don't have two people that are on the same page about their faith. And so we were kind of had one foot in Catholicism, but then one foot in the world. And so when because like when I joined the military, like I tried to be like, oh yeah, like they offer religious services on Sunday, like I'm gonna go to mass on Sunday. I went like the first week I was there, like they didn't give us that option because it's crazy. It's called in processing, and so you have thousands of people coming to a training center, and you're trying to get them their uniforms, trying to get them assigned to a training unit, try to get them all gone through there. So that first week it wasn't an option. Go into the second week, again, wasn't an option, but Sundays are kind of one of those days where the drill instructor, like, people think that drill instructors, all they do is just run around and scream at soldiers all day. No, they're doing a ton of planning behind the scenes. Like,
Mm-hmm.
if you're tired, your drill instructor is even more tired because
Mm-hmm.
they're the ones that are they're the stewards of your training and the stewards of your indoctrination into the military. Um, and we found out very quickly that Sundays were kind of uh, their planning day. And so, well, yeah, they would still come in and check on us. And well, we still had to do things like area beautification. So, like, there was always, pine cones to pick up, or grasses to be mowed, or leaves to be swept, or weapons to be cleaned, or things like
Mm-hmm.
that. That's how we spent our Sundays. And some people went to religious services. And when those people went to religious services, other people slept. And so like one time I went to religious service, I went to mass one time and ended up like as I look back at it, it was like a pretty powerful experience because it was like it was a military chaplain, a military priest that was performing mass in the middle of an arena, essentially is what it was. And you had like 2,000 young soldiers that are going through basic training, all praying and participating in the mass. And there's no kneelers. There's no. It's like it's a mass in the middle of a this big civic center. Essentially, is what it is. So you didn't have any of like the Catholic paraphernalia that goes along with the mass. Like
Mm-hmm.
you didn't have the stained glass windows. You didn't have the big crucifix at the head of the church. You didn't have the tabernacle. You didn't have and you had the priest and in the
Mm-hmm.
middle of the room performing the sacrifice of the mass. So it was a cool experience, but it wasn't enough of a thing to go, oh yeah, I'm going to do this every Sunday because I'm dog tired, and while other people are coming to do this, there's other folks that are back at the training area sleeping. So I'm gonna sleep.
Mm-hmm. Fair enough.
Yeah. So and then get done with basic training AIT. I'm a National Guardsman, so I'm one of those they call weekend warriors.
Mm-hmm.
So my obligations, I'm not a full-time member of the military. I'm part-time military. So I enter back into the civilian world and I step foot on a college campus. And since growing up, there was some good roots in Catholicism, and I had a good moral compass. I had good values. I knew what was right. I knew what was wrong. I knew the faith, which caused some issues between me and my dad a little bit when I was becoming a young man. Because I'm like, hey, like if you don't do like, I can remember having a couple conversations with him, like, hey, like if you don't start doing this, you're going to hell, and I don't want my dad
Mm-hmm.
to go to hell. So, um, there was a few things there that caused a little bit of conflict and issues, but then you know you take away all that structure, and now I'm a young man going into college that really hasn't figured out his own identity yet, doesn't really have a strong Catholic identity, just went through uh like 15 weeks of indoctrination into a new mindset.
Mm-hmm.
And like I was in the best shape of my life. I was uh like full of testosterone and anger and energy, and just wanted to go and uh experience, quote unquote freedom on the college
Okay.
campus.
Fair enough. Um, so, or now that we kind of have a more solid understanding of your Catholic background and faith background during that time, um, let's mirror that and take a look. So, what was it during this time? So, you grew up playing video games. Sounds like from an early age.
Yeah.
Um, and how did that like affect you in like with your friendships in high school? I mean, I've actually set foot on a military basic training area before, so I know what it looks like, and I know you basically have no time. There is no access to those kinds of things.
Yep.
So at least for at least basic, and AIT is usually pretty intense as well. So at least for those 15 weeks, I would definitely understand that that's not a thing. How did your video gaming hobby interact during those times, especially before in high school, and then once you hit college?
Yeah, so in high school, I was a band kid, and so all my friends were band kids too. So we were like super nerds. And so when we were getting together, we weren't getting together to play tackle football in someone's backyard. We weren't
Mhm.
getting together to go hunting or fishing or camping. When we got together, we were like having like Halo LAN parties, and we were
Mhm.
getting together and we were like, oh hey, I just got this new game, it's called Assassin's Creed, let's all like get together on the couch and watch one of us. We were doing, like the you know
You're live
later.
streaming. You're couch live streaming.
Yeah, right. A little bit later along the line, they call them Let's Plays. I don't know if you remember the Let's Plays on
Yep.
YouTube, but
A lot. Yep.
that's essentially what we were doing, is like Let's Play whatever game it was. And so I can remember like growing up, my best friend Derek, we would get together and we'd go back and forth we'd bounce between each other's houses, and it would be like, hey, I've got Assassin's Creed, let's play this. Or like, hey, I've got Fable, let's go play this. Hey, I've got we're gonna have a Halo LAN party. Hey, and then Rock Band and Guitar Hero became a big thing. Um, so we would get together and we would have a group of 10 to 15 teenagers playing these music co-op games, Rock Band and
Mhm.
Guitar Hero, and having competitions or having groups, and just like essentially having a karaoke night, an interactive karaoke night. um, didn't really play a lot of first person shooters together other than Halo. Maybe a little bit of Call of Duty Zombies every now and then, but me and my friends were definitely more focused in the action adventure RPGs, and then the music games. So, and then there was even DJ Hero was a thing for a while. Um, and then
Oh yeah, yeah. It was what was it? It was like the Guitar Hero with the same colors, but the wheels were different. I don't know. It was
Yeah,
weird.
they had like a record deck, and the record, like, so you had your three buttons that were on the record deck, and then that record deck spun, and there was a
Hmm.
fade, and there was a fader switch, and like, so like you could, you know, like mime what a DJ actually does, but
Oh, okay.
with that, it was one of those, it was the time, it was the peak of rhythm games is what it was, like, because like Dance Dance Revolution was a big thing too. And I remember that
Yeah.
we had a couple DDR mats at home too. The
Mm.
DDR mats at home were not ever as good as the DDR mats at the arcade.
No.
Um so I mean, that was one of the things that, like, rhythm games were a big deal, and so the companies were trying to really capitalize on, oh well, we got guitar. Okay, cool. Now we have Rock Band with drums and vocals and bass. We have DDR with the dancing. What other rhythm can we do? Oh well, how about like electronic music and dancing? Let's do DJ Hero.
Hmm.
Um, so that's what we did a lot through high school. Um, is those action adventure RPGs, doing that let's play. And then another thing we would do is, if we each had the same game, we'd play them independently, and then when we got together, it'd be like, oh hey, like I did this, or this is the thing that I found out about this, or hey, I was exploring this area over here, and did you know about this thing? And like, and we would have just kind of that discovery of the world together, playing the games independently. um, and then basic training, of course, there was no video games in basic training. Once I got to ADIT, I did buy a laptop at the post exchange.
Yep.
I did download Steam, and I think the first game that I downloaded in Steam was maybe Hitman Blood Money. I think
Oh, wow.
was the very first game I downloaded on Steam. It was either that or it was Portal, one of the two. And then during AIT, after our first like couple days, we got through our first phase of AIT. To then, it's like we weren't in a barracks anymore. We were more in like, it was a barracks, but it was more dorm style. So like, you had a roommate instead of a bay of guys, and so it was a little more private. And so you and classes and everything were done like during the business day. So you'd wake up and you'd do PT at 7 o'clock in the morning, or maybe 6:30 in the morning. You do PT, you do your personal hygiene, and then by 8 o'clock you start your classes. And then classes go from 8 to 4, and that with a chow break in there. And then at 4, go to chow, or 4:30 go to chow. And then the evening was kind of, go back to the barracks, and kind of do your thing. Like, there was a like a just like a dorm. There was a community space where like some guys, like, they had an Xbox out there, and they were playing Call of Duty, like, four split screen, four people at a time on Call of Duty. Or they would have like a movie night, and like, hey, we're gonna play this movie in the group space. Or there'd be some people that are like, hey, like, we're gonna, yeah, we did PT this morning, but we have nothing else to do. We're gonna go do PT again. We're gonna go to the gym and lift. And then other times it was like, oh well, I have my laptop now, and I have some of these games that I wanted to play, and so I'd go back to my dorm room and I'd play on
Hmm.
my little laptop. Um, and yeah, so there wasn't a very large period of time in my life where video games weren't a thing. It was just kind of that initial 11 weeks of basic training where there was no access to video games.
Fair enough. So, and then, so you hit college. You To utilize your term, I think from last time we talked, you kind of jumped off the deep end.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
let's talk about how you came back. My understanding was you kind of were looking and experiencing life, and you kind of came to terms with, if this is all that life is, this isn't worth living. So what brought you back?
Yeah, what brought me back, right? So, through that time, video games were a thing, and then eventually, like, I bought a piece, like a real PC, not my little laptop, and
Hmm.
and then I had a PlayStation 4 and a PlayStation 3, and because most of my gaming was console gaming, and a lot of it was, again, that action adventure RPGs, so a lot of Metal Gear Solid, a lot of Skyrim, uh, games like that. I did dip my toe into sports games for a bit, so I was in like doing some Madden NFL stuff, uh, and then really got into like the Soulsborne type games, like with Bloodborne on the PS4. Played all that game a lot, but so that was always there, kind of in the background.
Mm-hmm.
But in the foreground, it was, okay, like I've got to go to class, and so I'm going to college classes most of the time. There were some classes that it's like, oh, this is a dumb class. I'm going to skip it. I'm not going to go to it. Um, and during that time, then of course I was in the, it's like, well, what do people do? Like, well, people, they get together and they try to find girlfriends, and they get together and they try to, they're trying to, uh, sow those wild oats, and they're trying to participate in the pleasures of the flesh. And so that's what I was focused on. So I was still going to class, and I was, um, chasing girls, and did get was in a relationship, and so I had a girlfriend, and um, then but then what was our life kind of centered around? Yeah, I was in this relationship with someone, but what were we doing? Well, we were going to class, and then when we weren't at class, we were partying, or we were hanging out with friends, or we were drinking.
Mm-hmm.
And so it wasn't like a relationship that was like founded in any type of like Christocentric relationship. It wasn't like, hey, we're two people that are seeking the vocation of marriage, and we're going to date, and we're going to find out if we're compatible, and if we want to continue this, and do we actually believe the same thing. It was more like, no, this is what people do, right? They get together, and then they move in together, and they uh all of the issues and problems that go along with living with someone when you're not married to them.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then that relationship devolved, and she dumped me, and that's fine. That is what it
Mm-hmm.
is.
Yeah.
Uh, and then trying to cope with that by going to the bottom of a bottle of whiskey, like,
Mm-hmm.
instead of like, let's process this emotional loss that you're feeling in a healthy way by going like, hey, let's do some introspection, and let's, like, why did she dump me? Like, is there things in
Mm-hmm.
my life? But of course, when you're living in a state of sin like that, you're just, there's so much pride that
Mm-hmm.
you can't even, like, well, there's nothing wrong with me. Like, I'm hot shit. I'm a soldier, and I'm in college, and I'm maintaining a 3.6 right now, and I'm still like, I could do that while still skipping class and going to parties and being hungover and all this. Like,
Mm-hmm.
so like, I'm not doing anything wrong. Like, I'm hot. Excuse my language, but that's
Yeah,
just
I'll
the
bleep it out. Don't worry.
yeah, right. But that's the mindset that I was going with, and then of course it's like, well, how do you cope with really an emotional loss? Well, you do what the world does. You turn on some sad country music, and you find yourself at the bottom of a bottle, right? Um,
I think mine was 3 Days Grace, but to
yeah,
each their own.
yeah. Uh, Mine was actually like August Burns Red, The Devil Wears Prada, like going real into the heavy music. But um, and then it didn't help that like my college roommates, or my friends in college, they really weren't pursuing a faith either. They were doing the same things that I was doing. So it's kind of this negative feedback loop, if you will. And it's like, oh well, oh man, you got dumped. Well, screw that person. Let's go drink,
Yep.
um, and then, but like, I do remember, like, I did have some good people in my life that were like really, really trying to reach out, and really, really trying to be like, hey, like, dude, like, um, that sucks that you got dumped, but like, maybe it's because of these reasons, and maybe it's because of this, and maybe you need to like, like maybe this is the moment where you stop going down the path you're going on, and pull yourself out of it. And of course, there was just so much pride that it was like, no, well, no, you don't know anything. I'm going to keep going. And then, then went into another relationship, and that was a pretty toxic relationship as well, where the focus of it was going to the bar a couple times a week, and partying and drinking, and then um, and really just got depressed, and was not living a good life. And then um, as that was happening, and the more and more I was drinking, and the more and more I was focused on the that type of lifestyle, um, the less and less I started showing up to class.
Mhm.
And you can actually you can look at my college transcript and you can like say like here's kind of the timeline of like where like hey, Andrew's doing like he got done with basic training, he's doing really good, and then the downward spiral you could see just my transcript as the semesters go along on what's happening.
Yep.
And then then got dumped from that relationship and really went off the deep end, and started using marijuana
Mm.
and drinking a lot. And then what ended up happening then is then like watching YouTube videos or playing video games, still playing video games. And the video games that I played, a lot of like Dark Souls or Bloodborne or any type of action adventure game, there's usually some kind of mysticism or some kind of occult or some kind of
Mhm.
spiritual power that's going on in that kind of game. Um, and then so it seemed like the content all of a sudden that I was looking at and consuming kind of shifted more into that esoteric, uh, mysticism, new age kind of, incense and crystals and, you're finding your higher self and, all of this really strange esoteric stuff to which I don't encourage. Like if anybody's thinking about that stuff, like just it's all BS. Like it's all junk. I know that the girl with dreadlocks that smells like patchouli is really pretty, and you might want to have a relationship with her, but she's not. She's selling a bad bag of goods. Like that's not a way that you want to go down. So all of a sudden, this was the kind of content that was through the YouTube algorithm that was coming through, and so then I like started asking questions, and like I found a couple books on meditation and books on like Eastern mysticism and not Eastern Orthodox mysticism, like East Asian
Yeah,
mysticism,
like
like
Oriental. Yeah.
Oriental, yeah,
Mhm.
like that Taoism and Taoism and
Mhm.
Zen and all this
Confucianism
kind
and
of,
yep.
and really what it ended up being was like you get into these meditation books and um it's about emptying yourself, it's about losing yourself, it's about becoming nothing, uh and by becoming nothing you then achieve enlightenment. And it's like it's this really weird thing though, because um as you start to meditate or as you try to empty yourself, it's like, well, if you're emptying yourself, there's opportunity for anything to come back in.
Mhm.
You're losing, you're consenting to giving up of your will, uh,
Mm.
and not exercising your will. And so, if you're not exercising your will, something else is going to. Um, and then it all kind of culminated in some events that were, kind of along the line of like demonic obsession and oppression, and like was going through this and going through this and going through this, and there was just kind of like this small quiet voice that was like, hey, like why don't you open up the Bible? Like, like started to get to a point where I was introspective because all of this stuff was going on, and was starting to really question and be like, if this is all life, all there is to life, like this sucks. Like I'm not happy. My friends don't like me. I don't like my friends. Uh, like this is all just kind of it's BS. And if this is all there is to it, then it's not even worth it. And I can either continue down this path of self destruction, or I can seek the meaning of life, and I could seek and try to find something more. And so all of a sudden on my desk, in addition to these meditation books, is then, well, the Bible would show up there as well. And then in my uh stupidity was like, well, what if all of this is true, and why don't we blend both of these together and kind of come up with your own faith or something. And eventually it all culminated in an event where I had an out of body experience,
Mm.
and in this out of body experience I felt a demonic evil presence, and
Mm.
kind of was like, oh man, like I am in deep trouble. uh And at that time I called out to the Lord. I called out, I said, Jesus, send your angels, save me.
Mm-hmm.
And I kind of felt a little kick, and then I snapped back, and I was back in my body, and it was like, whoa, this was crazy. And so I called up everybody I knew at that time and just told them about this crazy out of body experience that I just had. And then like, okay, like, so like, that means that I believe this. I believe in Christianity. I believe in Jesus. But I'm not quite there yet. I'm not quite, like, I've made that declaration, yeah, I was a confirmed Catholic going into college, but then 5.5 years of debauchery led me into a very precarious spiritual place.
Mm-hmm.
And and then all right, so here we go. Uh, and then that's where like the oppression really started to kick in, because then there was a couple days after that. Really, there was like this voice in my head that wasn't my voice, that was like, Andrew, you're in the matrix right now. The only way to get out of the matrix is to kill yourself. Like, you gotta, like, your whole family is out here waiting for you. Like, there's something like bad going on. You're in the matrix, and there's something bad out here going on in your family here, and like, you don't have a lot of time left. Like, you don't have a lot of time left. Like, you need to get out of the matrix. And like, I'm going like, okay, this voice is telling me that I need to kill myself. I had experience when I was younger with suicide. Um, the captain of my swim team, when I was, because I did swimming in high school, one of the team captains committed suicide, and I was like,
Mm-hmm.
um, man, like, I saw the impact that had on his family. I saw the impact that had on the friends, on the swim team, on the whole community. It was like, there was still a part of me that loved my family, and still a part of me that had this like, no, like, that's not an option. Like, I've seen
Mm-hmm.
what that does. Like, after that had happened, I like made a vow that like I'd never ever ever do that. And here there's this voice that's trying to egg me on to do that thing. Um
It almost
and that
sounds like the demons that were directly uh, affecting you almost kind of knew that you were slipping away, and so it was like the Hail Mary pass, or I guess the opposite of what a Hail Mary pass would be. Uh,
it was the
to
last it was the
Yeah,
last
it
ditch
was
effort.
a last ditch effort to try to snare you. Yeah.
Yeah. And and like, I had like a book that I borrowed from a friend that had moved to Duluth. And I was like, okay, like, I have this book, like, I need to mail this back to him. I talked to him earlier this week. I told him I'd drop it in the mail. So I need to go and do that. So I went, and I like went to the book, and like, things were weird, man. Like, I went to the UPS store, and like, the interaction I had with that person, it seemed like that person wasn't real. Like, it seemed like I was like,
I was
okay, I'm playing Elder Scrolls Skyrim right now, and I
Oh,
go to the shop, and it's like,
yeah.
here's my list of dialogue options that I can say to this person. So I like, click the dialogue option for like, mail back book. And then like, it seemed like the canned NPC result
Mm-hmm.
um of
Was
that.
Yeah.
And this was the interaction with this, and it's like, but no, this was a real person. This was a
Mm-hmm.
person with spirit and life within them.
Mm-hmm.
uh and because of what was going on spiritually, I was deceived in that moment, and was like, this is weird, this doesn't feel right. And I was like, okay, well, I haven't had lunch yet. And at the time, I was delivering sandwiches for Jimmy John's. When you were a Jimmy John's employee at that time, you could go in and you could get a sub for the day if you worked a shift. And I was I worked a shift earlier in the day. And so I went in, and I went to get my free sub, and I was like, maybe if I just have some food, and like,
Mm-hmm.
and but then I go in, and these people that I'd worked with, they didn't seem like real people either, and it seemed like this NPC interaction. And I was like, man. And then so then I eat my sandwich, and I'm driving around in my car, and I'm like, all of a sudden, it's like voices are just like, just swerve into oncoming traffic, just do it now. Now's your chance, just do it, swerve into oncoming traffic, you could do it, just do it now. And eventually, at this point, it's like, all right, Jesus saved me. I acknowledge that fact. I believe in this. Well, where do I find him?
Mm-hmm.
And I find, like, because of my upbringing, it's like, well, he's in the tabernacle. That's where Jesus is. So go to a church. And I was still attending college at the time, and so I went to the Newman Center on the college campus. And when I entered, it was like this. Things kind of seemed to like snap back into reality. It was like, okay, like outside of this room or outside of this building, it seemed like I was just pressing buttons on an NPC, and maybe I am in the Matrix, and maybe these voices are right. But then I step in the Newman Center, and that like falls away, and reality snaps back. And there was a student there from the Newman Center, and she sees me come in, and she didn't know who I was because I'd never like I wasn't practicing my Catholic faith when I was going to college, so like I never stepped foot in the Newman Center prior to that. Well, maybe a couple times, because I do remember like there was one of my classmates that she tried to get me to be a Newman Center person. Like she's like, hey, like we're having a cookout, come and have supper with us. And like I went and had supper and like met a couple people, but was like, oh man, you guys are squares, like this is it is what it is. Like I know better. Like in my pride was like, hey, like I know better than you guys. I'm not gonna. You guys are squares. I'm not gonna associate with you or whatever. But now in hindsight, looking back, it's like, oh, that was a person who actually truly deeply cared about me. Could kind of see the path of life that I was on, and in the moment, like threw out the fishing line, as you will, and like threw that out and said like, hey, like here's the invitation to come and participate in life the way you should be. But I go there, and the student doesn't recognize me, and I'm like on the verge of tears at this point. And she's like, hey, how's it going? And I'm like, I'll be honest, not doing great. Is the priest here? And she's like, yeah, let me try to find him. And so we go to his office. He's there, and I have like a total breakdown. I embrace this man. I'm a total mess at this point because all of my Catholic upbringing is starting to really come to the forefront, and my declaration of no, like I am a Christian. I believe in Jesus. He's my savior. That also coming into light, and that's what a priest is. Priest is in those moments during Mass, he's in persona Christi, and in that moment, for me, just seeing the cassock and seeing the collar and everything, it's like that's Christ on earth. And I broke down and embraced this man, and he's like, okay, this is what's going on here. He gets me sat down, gets me a box of Kleenexes, kind of gets me all situated, and he goes, okay, what's going on? And I tell him everything, and he comes back and he said, yeah, okay. So what I need you to do, if you are serious about this, is I need you to go home. I need you to get rid of all your drug paraphernalia. I need you to get rid of any weird books you might have. I need you to get rid of any of this weird stuff that you might have. And then I need you to sit down, and you told me that you haven't been to Mass, or you really haven't been to confession for like 6.5 years. So you need to do like a really, really good examination of conscience. Write it down. I have confessions on Saturday before Mass, and I hope I see you here. And so that's what I did then. And then that following week, like things were still weird. Like I was still very vulnerable, and there was still these kind of attacks that were happening. So then I called my mom, right? I'm like, hey mom, like I need some help. This is, and another, like I had a business professor too, that, because I was kind of on the way, like I was on the way out of it. I kind of hit that rock bottom, and so I was starting to go to class again, and I was trying to get done with college, and so I was trying to be diligent. And I had this professor in the business college that was like, okay, something's wrong with Andrew, because he usually participates in class, and he's not participating. So he pulled me aside after class, and he said, hey, what's going on? I told him what was going on, and he's like, okay, so who can we call? And so I was like, let's call my mom. So called my mom. My mom came to Fargo and stayed with me for a couple weeks and helped me get everything cleaned up. And we went to Mass went to confession and Mass, and then have been practicing the faith ever since. So that was
praise God.
Yeah, that was back in 2016 is when that happened. So I had a very, very, very intense conversion, you would say, or reversion, and it's very much a prodigal son. That's my favorite parable. is the parable, the prodigal son, because really that's what I can relate most to. And then of course, then you have like the mercy of God. That's like, hey, I know that you disowned me. I know that you hated me. I knew that you wanted me dead and you wanted my inheritance for yourself, and I gave it to you because
Mhm.
you're my son and I love you, and I'm going to give you what you want. And you went off into the world and you tried to do it your own way, and you recognize that, and I'm just glad that you're not dead and that you're here and invited you back into the fold. And it's such a powerful story, and so I relate to that quite a bit. Don't
Wonderful.
know don't know how this relates to video games at all, and all of a sudden we're getting on to an interview of hey, this is a Catholic Gamers podcast, and here's Andrew, who's a Catholic, and we're gonna
Yeah.
hear about, we're gonna hear about Andrew's Catholicism here.
Yeah. So, just as a side note, I might put like a warning, just kind of label of like, hey, we're gonna be talking about some deep stuff here. If you're dealing with suicide, if you're dealing with drug use, just God loves you, and please seek help, and we love you, and so I might do something like that. If
No, yeah, by all
yeah.
means. And for if there's anybody that does listen to this, there's a lot of people out there that are praying for you. There's a lot of people out there that care about you. Even if you don't think so, um, based on your situation, uh, there's the whole communion of saints and there's the whole legions of heaven that are
Mhm.
on your side. So, um, really, even if you don't think that there is someone there, there is. Um, and there's all sorts of resources. Like there's the Suicide Hotline. There's uh, different resources on college campuses for substance abuse. Every city has probably a county office that has some resources. Uh, have some courage and walk into a parish, a Catholic parish, and have a conversation with a priest and say, "Hey, Father, I'm struggling with some of these things. Can I get some help?" And if he doesn't help you there, he at least knows some people that can help you. So, yeah, don't despair. People have been there and people have gotten out of it, and you can too.
Yep, absolutely. And we're praying for you as well. It just everyone out there who is struggling with this, because I mean, you're not alone. Like we've all are in one way or another have dealt with something like this. We may not be dealing with the exact same thing that you're dealing with. God loves you. We love you. We're praying for you. Feel free to reach out even to us. We do have a email address. We'd be happy to put you on a prayer list. But yeah, so that was very heavy. I was not expecting that, Andrew.
Well, James, you asked the question, and I
Yeah, I
and I
did.
and I answered. So
Yeah, yeah, and what we're seeing. We've got a very small footprint right now of people following us, but if even one person hears this and is able to go back to God and and ask for forgiveness, that we've done more than what we are able to do by ourselves. So that was definitely God working in our lives and in that individual's life. So. Not to speed us up because we are at about 53 minutes right now. Um, so what was it? You are now happily married.
yeah,
You have a career.
yeah,
You are potentially moving back to your hometown to be
yeah,
closer to Connor.
yeah.
Like God has blessed you in so many ways, and you are expecting your second. Is that correct?
The second is here. The second
Oh,
is yeah. The second is now about 4 weeks old, and so
congrats.
we're not sleeping much right now.
No.
We're adjusting to family life with multiple children. Uh, but yeah, and that's one of the things too that like with my whole conversion experience, it's like um, I have everything I ever wanted,
Hmm.
and and it's because God has blessed me with everything I've ever wanted.
Yeah.
And after that really intense spiritual battle that I went through, uh, and started putting Christ at the center of my life as best I can. I'm still working on it. I mean, that's the whole process of sanctification is recognizing those areas where you still need some work, um, and leaning on the faith and praying and fasting and going to the sacraments. Uh, but things are really really good, um, and it's all because I went through this intense battle, recognized the truth of the reality, recognized that Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life, and like you can take him at his word, you can trust him,
Hmm.
because I trust him, and he's given me everything I've ever wanted.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it would seem against God's nature, but being the philosopher that I am, uh, being that God's nature is truth, right? All truth flows from Him because He is truth itself. Uh, it, it doesn't make sense. It's literally like logically impossible for Him to lie. And if he truly does say, "I love you. I want what's best for you. I want to provide you what's best for you," he will do that, and because everything he does say is true. Um, so to wrap things up here really quickly, so you're going through a lot. You come back to the faith. Um, the joke is right now is that like while you do game with us, you don't have a lot of games on Steam. It seems like gaming ever since then has kind of taken a side back, right? You're focused on marriage, you're focused on your kids, but every now and then you are wanting to try to like really connect outside of where you're at now. You're really into what was it, the simulation racing and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and it goes in spurts for me. It just seems like a lot of my hobbies goes in spurts. So, like other hobbies, I'm a musician, right? And that's my job in the military is to be a musician for the military. So, I do have to maintain some level of musicality in my
Mm-hmm.
life. So that takes some time.
Mm-hmm.
I like to play chess. That takes time. Uh, not FPS chess. And if Connor gets on the podcast and is talking trash on how he's undefeated in chess against Andrew, it's in FPS chess, not classical, the game of gentlemen. Um, but yeah, and then I even put sim racing in a different category than just gaming in general,
Sure.
because with sim racing, with the power of the physics engines that these simulators have these days, like you have to learn how to drive a race car. You have to learn how to drive on a racetrack, or you have to get to know. Like I like to do rally racing because uh, it's got a lot of variables in rally racing. So you have to learn how your car is going to take a corner. You got to know how gravel is going to feel on the tires. You got to know how snow is going to feel on the tires, and how your car is going to react. And then how it reacts with your equipment as well. So when I first started, I had a Thrustmaster TMX steering wheel and pedal set, and didn't realize that I really couldn't feel the road, really couldn't feel how the car was reacting. I've now upgraded to like the top of the line Fanatec sim equipment, and it's way different. It feels like it's like, oh, like I'm actually sitting in a car and driving. And I put that in a different category of just going through like I'm going through Shadow of Mordor right now, as far as my hobby, I guess. And so the way that I really look at video games, and if I really distill it down, is it's interactive narrative. And those are the games that I enjoy, is where you're able to interact with the narrative. So games that are in that RPG category. So Shadow of Mordor, Shadow of War, The Elder Scrolls, Skyrim, The Witcher 3, just to name a couple. You're interacting with the story, and it's a lot of fun. But then I mean, like, there's other games too that are in that action category that I like. So really like the Tom Clancy Splinter Cell series. I think that it still holds up. I've been playing a little bit of Splinter Cell Chaos Theory, and it's still just as fun as I remember it being when I played it as a kid. And then like the Metal Gear Solid series going through, and MGS1, MGS2, Sons of Liberty, Metal Gear Solid 3. It's a lot of good games out there in that action and action RPG category. They're interactive narrative, so then I can sit down and interact instead of reading a book and like, oh yeah, I'm reading and I'm watching the narrative unfold in the book. It's no, I'm interacting with the narrative and watching the narrative unfold with my actions on screen. So that's kind of how my hobby is right now. Every now and then I'll still jump on and I'll play Payday 2 or Borderlands 3 or whatever we're gaming on. But the shooter genre is not my favorite.
Yeah, so I know I'm the same way. I really love those stories and just kind of engaging with the stories and things of that nature. But well, unfortunately, we do have to wrap up. We're at an hour now. So, Andrew, anything else you'd like to share or add, or?
No, I didn't realize I was going to be as vulnerable as I was in this. When we were working on the pre-production on the show, about like, hey, this is what the episode's going to be about. So I really thought about, like, this is kind of my gaming history, and these are the games I grew up playing. These are the games I like to play. These are the games now. But obviously, the conversation was supposed to go a different way. So that's the way it went, and just being vulnerable and having the courage to be vulnerable, even though we don't know each other as well as, like, Connor, or if everything, because well, the first time I ever met you was at Connor's wedding. So
yeah, we were groomsmen together.
Yeah, we were, and it was a good time. Connor's wedding was a lot of fun. So
it was. So, alrighty. Well, with all that being said, thank you, Andrew, for once again, being so vulnerable, and thank you for letting others into that or into your little bit of your story there, and praise God for one, for you being open to God's calling, as He is always calling us back home. But yeah, and then for you, listener, thank you for listening. If you like this episode, please leave a review, follow this podcast, let others people know that this podcast exists. You can always email us at CatholicGamersPod. That's CatholicGamersPod@gmail.com. Connor does stream sometimes just getting together and playing. We're a little bit blue on that side, so just a little bit of a warning for you all out there. He streams usually on Tuesdays from 7:30 p.m. Central Time to about 9 p.m. Central Time. So if you want to jump in, join us, see what's going on, participate in our conversation, be more than happy to have you. That is twitch.tv/fatalcondor. That's exactly how you would think it's being spelled. And once again, you can always email us at CatholicGamersPod@gmail.com. And once again, with all that being said, thank you for listening, and God bless. All right, now I got to go to confession.
Yeah.